Dolgin adds a 20th century gloss. The movement from status to contract is also a movement from inherent value to market value. This is where society is going today. In substituting contract for status, society substitutes freedom for security and choice for familiarity. 1990. As a consequence, present-day law in the process of this transformation is shot through with ambivalence. It reflects no single-minded approach to reality. She observes, but simultaneously incorporates status-based and contract-based assumptions. Thus, Dolgin shows how the conflicting arguments about surrogacy that arose in the notorious American case of Baby M validated both status and contract. The New Jersey Superior Court upheld the surrogacy contract, framed the case as involving primarily the best interests of the baby, decided that those interests required terminating the surrogate's parental rights, granted full custody to the contracting father, and ordered the adoption of the baby by the commissioning mother, while the New Jersey Supreme Court invalidated the surrogacy contract, outlawed the payment of money to the surrogate, and voided both the determination of the surrogate's parental rights and the adoption of the baby. Dolgin, 1990. Dolgin offers a superb and detailed analysis, yet perhaps we do not need Maine's historical view. Perhaps it is not necessary to say that there has been a movement from status to contract. In fact, one could as well say that the difference between contract and status suggested by Maine was an invention of a world view already based on contract, that is, a worldview based on certain definitions of human responsibility, including the one basic to the will to engineer society, and thus includes the notorious social contract as conceived by the Enlightenment. Though Maine himself takes the phrase as an inexcusable liberty with defects, he also found it necessary to criticize earlier ideas of the social compact, which bound subjects to the traditional authority of the king. In sum, status refers to the pre-existing conditions values inherent in previous positions and relationships, and thus to the kind of natural world with which human enterprise must deal, precisely to the extent that contracts stand for what persons agree upon. These days often understood as also implying by choice. Both carry obligations, but a different weight is put on the origin of the obligation, deciding on which phenomena can be allocated to one or the other category, when would not be so dissimilar to their differentiating the traditional from the modern. In drawing this parallel, I do not want to suggest that status and contract can be read off as traditional and modern. On the contrary, appeals to tradition and modernity constitute a theoretical range of their own. Tradition may support the diverse positions, but is recognizable in its appeal to past practice. Thus, the two judgments Dolgin quoted from the Baby M case, and as she observes, judicial positions more thoroughly at odds cannot be imagined, could argue from the same traditionalist stance, both upheld that whatever the legitimate demands of the marketplace, they should retire before the sacred prerogatives of institutions and impulses hallowed by fixed, eternal nature. Dolgin 1990. The opinion of the Superior Court judge was that the family offered by the commissioning couple and the maternity offered by the commissioning mother were everything the historic ideal required. The surrogate mother, on the other hand, was in breach of contract itself, evidence of her unreliability, unreal, unreliability, and was required to honor her prior agreement. The Supreme Court, by contrast, declared that contract could not invalidate motherhood, and that the child's parents were her biological parents, and on various technical grounds, the contract was also declared invalid for contravening New Jersey law. In effect, the court simultaneously upheld the ideal of contract as an agreement governed by fair dealing, while deciding on suitability for parenting in diverse but thoroughly status terms. Dolgin suggests that traditional ideas about family life were at the root of both sets of judicial opinion. Appeals to modernity, on the other hand, while also being in the interest of maintaining good practice, are likely to be expressed as appeals to realism or enlightenment. In the case of the 98.07% father, one of the dissenting judges said that the atmosphere surrounding the decision to reject the biological father's claim was one of make-believe. When and if the court awakes to reality, he said, it will find a world very different from the one it expects. As the earlier observed, in this day and age, providing paternity by asking intimate questions will be decidedly anachronistic. Who on earth will choose this method when blood tests proves it with far more certainty and far less fuss? However, while tradition as such can be evoked fairly safely, modernity has a much more ambivalent ring. It cannot be appealed to with such certain authority. Thus, despite his comments on disagreements over interpretation, the dissenting judge in fact goes out his way to say that his own arguments had not overlooked tradition either in considering previous judgments or in upholding interests and practices central to the defense of liberty. His protagonist, on the other hand, more hesitantly asserts that even in modern times, paternity claims by the natural father have not been generally acknowledged. Indeed, status and contract, traditions and modernity are not terms of comparable cultural standings in this context. Litigants may refer to the importance of validating or annulling contracts, but in the material present in the material presented here, it is the commentator who sees this argument ranged side by side which with those that appeal to status. Status isn't likely to be bandied about in quite the same way. Similarly, 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 one could probably find innumerable verbal references to tradition and the values it represents, but I wonder if people could actually promote claims on the grounds of modernity, or at least to do so without equivocation. What commentators might consider as modern will often simply be phrased in terms of what people feel is contemporary or new in their lives, or else is evidence of an unrealistic approach to the world. Some of the couples in Southeast England Some of the couples in Southeast England to whom Eric Hirsch, 1993, talked about aspects on the new reproductive technologies saw everything on the move in this sphere. In reflecting on how one might decide what is best, one woman observed, it's difficult to say because what would be sound now in 10 years' time, the improvements in science and the improvements in technology, who's to say the barriers won't move? A man spoke in similar vein. A lot of it really is to say through these questions are people's morals or understanding keeping up with the changes in medicine, and do people feel all these changes are for the good, and are we ready for them? Medicine is racing well ahead. These people are not quoted as referring to modernity, but were they to do so, one suspects it will be tagged with just hesitations and qualify enthusiasm for it. It is somehow not quite as sound a concept as tradition on which to base positive claims. Tradition and contract belong to an everyday as well as an analytical vocabulary. Then, while their complement, status, and modernity are either esoteric or ambivalent, the domains of values to which the two sets refers are in any case found in overlapping and cross-cutting combinations, but there is an interesting parallel between them. In one sense, the terms are coeval. We have seen that arguments based on contracts lie side by side with those based on status. Yet the pairing as such semantically encompasses the idea of a trend away from one domain and toward the other, so that they also seem to contain within them a movement from status and to contract. And here it will seem we cannot be at both ends of the continuum at the same time. I want to suggest that is exactly where we might be. The suggestions arise from an otherwise perplexing sensation. This is the sense that there seems both more status and more contract around in the world, or at least in arguments about them. Would it also follow them that one might have both more tradition and more modernity at the same time? Choosing certainty. In commenting on information and communication technology, Hirsch in 1992 notes a paradoxical picture. From the perspective of this technology, it will seem that the most radical changes are occurring in modern culture, but from a second, complementary perspective, that of family relations and their associated consumption practices, a picture of continuity with the past is in evidence. He is reminded and reminds his reader of Raymond Williams' aphorism about the willed coexistence of very new technology and very old social form being a characteristic of our society. It is evident, however, that this distinction between the old and new applies as well to the way people think about aspects of these domains internal to themselves, technology, kinship, as it does to the relationship between them. Thus, the family relations to which Hirsch refers are internally subject to the same tension that is also held to exist between them and other areas of social life. Kinship is not some pre-modern form of social life left over from the past, any more than tradition antedates modernity. Kinship is traditional and modern at the same time. So when people draw on kinship as a source of identity, they evoke both old and new forms of relating, as well as the tension between them. Similarly, technology comes with an ancient promise, that of innovation. Many of the claims made for what new technology can do, the example here is cyberspace, were made for electricity 100 years ago. Marvin cited in Gray and Driscoll, 1992. The sense of being and both poles of a continuum at the same moment is not resolved through allocating some institution to the end, kinship of some technology to the other. I suspect the same is true for the relationship between what is taken for granted and what is seen as open to choice, status and contract, as ways in which Euro-Americans imagine the world in which they live. These are not to be disturbed between historical epochs or social institutions either. So trying to sort out the relative weight to be given to the pursuit of individual choice on the one hand, or to the claiming of pre-existing obligation and liability on the other, or to be given to the way natural facts are called on now to support values associated with innovation, now to hold values regarded as long cherished, will not work. Such an adjudication will fail to register a most significant cultural feature of present life. There is more of everything. This is said somewhat tongue is in check, or rather I am deliberately participating in Euro-American slang, the shortcut way in which quantitative idioms are used for quantitative differences. One aspect of this convention is the close association between the notion of increase in population, human capacity, time, and the notion of movement forward in history. Just as the people who spoke to Hirsch, see above, indicated, temporal increase. As each day passes, more has happened in the world, can be represented as a movement from the condition to another. More individualism, as Maine asserted, leads to the shift from status by contract. But equally well, of course, we observe that traditions supposedly left behind are also being brought forward at the same time. So the sense I want to convey is a kind of exaggeration that seems to take everything in its stride. Not just that there is more essentialist thinking around. For instance, the essentialism crucial to the novel idea of genetic welfare, Maringov, 1991, but that at the same time there is more relational thinking around families we choose, Weston, 1991. There is both more nature and more culture in people's discourses. I will even say that what lay people regard as science seemingly produces both more certainties and more uncertainties. And because that the exaggeration encompasses everything, it also encompasses reflexivity itself. How persons are constructed has become a project not simple of social science reflection, but of commercial management strategies, the zeros of investing in uncertain futures. One might be driven to think that societies running in the fast forward mode cannot any longer be studied. Chakrabarti, 1992.